Welcome to what is going to be the first of many conversations with people behind one of the most critical roles in modern business, and that's the CIO. I am Dennis Woodside. I'm the CEO of Freshworks, and I've spent years working with technology leaders from my time at Google to time on the board of ServiceNow to now leading Freshworks. So the more I talk to CIOs, the more I realize how diverse their roles really are. They don't just keep the lights on, they light the path forward. They enable all of us to do our jobs and be productive. And today's CIOs are really driving strategy. They're enabling AI adoption, which is on the front of mind of every CEO. They're safeguarding data. They support the needs of employees as those needs change. And more than anything, they're leading people through times of change. So these conversations are my way of learning more from the people who do the work every day, having conversations about what does it really take to lead in technology today. So while these conversations may or may not turn into something bigger, my hope is that they spark new thinking or shine a light on what CIOs are really doing, both inside their organizations and across industries. So whether you're a fellow technology leader, a business executive, or someone who's just curious about the evolving role of IT, my goal is that you will walk away with actionable insights on leadership, on innovation, and also on the human side of technology. So I'm excited to kick things off today with someone who brings a deeply human and pragmatic approach to IT leadership, and that's Sonja Browning Page. So over the past two decades, Sonja has led IT across some of the UK's most respected institutions, from universities to the British Transport Police. So today, as Director of Consulting Expert at CGI, a Freshworks partner in the UK, she's helping other organizations navigate the same complexity. So let's get into it. Sonja, welcome.
Thank you.
So Sonja, you've led transformation across some incredibly high stakes environments. So what's shaped your approach to leading IT through change?
So for me, it's really about people. It's putting people and the human experience front and center in all of our design decisions and strategic decisions. So we think about how people feel about change as much as what the business outcome is or the technology solutions. And as part of that, we make sure that we focus on real opportunities, that we are absolutely solving the right problems. In order to do that, it's really important to have an intimate understanding of the business requirements, the challenges, the economic surroundings around that as well. And the relationships across the organization and with our customers and our external stakeholders. And in order to really make sure that we're focused on the right things, we look at iterative co-design and data analysis to make sure that we have data-driven decision making. Something that's really close to my heart is moving from the macro to the micro. So strategically thinking small. We often conflate big and complex as to meaning strategic and important. So as CIOs, we often really only focus on the expensive and big and high risk projects. But in order to gain velocity, we really need to move to a mindset of making small and incremental improvements at pace. So not only do we deliver business benefits sooner that way, but also we reduce that risk and we improve our adaptability to be able to change with external changes and adapt to external changes as we need to. So for me, one of the really key important things to allow us to do that is having agility in the design of our solutions as well as our operating models as well. So choosing tools, choosing solutions that allow us to spin on a dime and adapt quickly.
That's really interesting. So big doesn't always equal strategic, and you have to be nimble. That's interesting. Now, you've experienced firsthand how the CIO role has changed pretty dramatically over the last 2 decades. What's the biggest shift in mindset that you've seen successful CIOs are expected to take in order to lead today?
Yeah, so I think 2 decades ago, IT was really seen as being the engine room, and what good looked like was efficiency, stability, security, and the role of the CIO was really to be the sort of chief engineer, to run that engine room well and efficiently. And I think really the biggest change is that shift in mindset that organizations have from IT being the order takers to really being the drivers for change and delivering competitive advantage. So digital really being a differentiator to organizations. And so as part of that change, we start to see CIOs on boards much more often. That was never really heard of. We were never kind of let out of the basement previously. And I think that really what the organization is looking for CIOs to be is the bridge and the glue, and the translator between the organization's objectives and really being able to see the vision and the opportunities. So we're really looking at working with people, with our colleagues much more closely, crafting a digital first business and operations strategies, and really looking at things like operating models, economic models, and how we leverage data and technology to across our supply chains and across our economic landscape. I think for a lot of organizations that has been perhaps a slower change, but really what has become apparent is it's adapt or die. So, we've seen previously really large and successful organizations perhaps not embrace digital transformation and have really suffered the consequences of that.
Yeah, I totally see that change. I know that I spend time with our CIO every week, and he is front and center in a lot of the major business initiatives that we're driving. So as the need for the CIO to move to the front office, to the strategic enabler has evolved, how has your leadership style changed?
So I think I've been very lucky, actually, because in some ways the world has changed around me to suit my interests and my passions. So I've always been really passionate about the business end of my organization. And I have mostly worked in the last sort of 25 years in not-for-profit organizations. And they're fantastic organizations to work for because you are always very aware of the benefit and the good that you are doing. And so really the way that the role of CIO has changed has allowed me to bring that interest in how we leverage technology, how we leverage data and digital to really deliver meaningful outcomes. So I'm no longer kind of constrained to the technology end. I'm no longer sort of locked in the data center in the basement. And good is measured much more widely than just, delivering on time and on budget. I think I see my role as very much being the innovator and the translator, keeping ahead of the curve of emerging technologies, but also understanding how these can be leveraged to the benefit of my organization. So taking a pragmatic approach to solving business problems. We don't want to be on the bleeding edge. We want to be cutting edge, but not on the bleeding edge. And, it's not technology for technology's sake. So I think the CIO and in fact the wider IT function are really that bridge and glue. They add value through facilitation and enablement and realization, and not just the operations and delivery, but really understanding the business as much as they understand the technology.
And part of that also is understanding the people and then helping a broad set of people, very diverse backgrounds, experiences through change. So how do you get your organizations, the people in those organizations, to embrace new technology rather than them fearing it?
Yes. So I think the really important thing is to understand your audience, understand who your target audience are, who's going to experience the change, and really empathize with the reasons for their concerns and their fears and their trepidation, and make sure that you actually address those concerns head on. Don't sweep them under the carpet and pretend that they're not happening. So I think, we've seen everything from concerns around digital literacy, especially around universities are really interesting organizations, actually, because we have both digital natives in our students, but also at the other end with our academics and our professional services staff, perhaps people that are used to working in a particular way for a really long time and actually worried about whether they're going to keep up. So digital skills definitely is part of that. But if we look at things like AI, for example, we're starting to see more concerns about things like job security, whether people's skills are becoming obsolete and replaced. We're also seeing concerns around things like quality and ethics. So really making sure that we understand those and addressing them head on and reassuring people that we have the safety measures and the safety nets in place to make sure that those don't happen. So, for example, AI is not going to be replacing people's jobs. It may change the way that people work. And if we can make sure that we give people the skills and the digital literacy that they need to leverage those tools, then actually they will find themselves being, in a really valuable position. So I think the earlier in the design process and the implementation process that we can start to think about business change and how we embrace change and bring people on board, the better. And I have already mentioned this, but I think a co-design approach is really key and critical in that, because it makes people feel in control and empowered to really shape the direction of technology.
It's interesting. We have some of those same change issues at Freshworks. Think about an engineer who's been writing software for 20 years in a very specific way. Now, all of a sudden, you have all of these tools to write code. It takes some time to get people comfortable that that's going to produce code that's actually good and usable and not going to cause problems. So I totally understand where you're coming from and where your teams are coming from when they have to adapt to this change and get comfortable with this change. It's a big deal. Where do you, and now while we're on the topic of AI, where do you see AI making the biggest difference in the public sector and in education?
So I think really the first and most obvious benefit, especially in the not-for-profit sector, is really operational improvement. So that automation of processes and support, really the driver for that is around removing costs of operations. And that doesn't necessarily mean cost savings, but allowing us to focus the resources that we do have on where that human interaction is vital and can't be replaced by technology. So it's a really good example of where AI isn't going to replace people, but perhaps free us from doing repetitive administration tasks to really being able to have those personal and human relationships. So this also allows us to shift our focus and our efforts into value-added activities such as creative thinking. So that example around the engineer, for example, is less about actually their ability to write code and more about their ability to design solutions to meet a customer or a business requirement. But I think as we mature and we think about really fully leveraging AI, then we can really create different outcomes. So really create a differentiator. So combining AI with really rich data sets and thinking about our data strategy. Looking at things like analytics and moving from reporting to predictive insights and predictive and prescriptive outcomes can really change and make the difference for organizations. And this isn't necessarily just about, sort of running things, more efficiently and making a profit. But it absolutely can be things. And so some of the use cases that we had in higher education, for example, might be looking at students that were at risk of leaving higher education or not passing one of their modules, and being able to point a human, as a member of staff, towards them and asking to intervene really early on in that process to change the outcome. So it can absolutely make a difference to people's lives as well. And that's something that we wouldn't have been able to do really before we had AI available to us.
Another thing that's been interesting about AI is there's both top-down directive or direction that's given by the CIO or by me in some cases, but there's also a lot of bottom-up experimentation that's going on with tools that are just widely available. How have you seen organizations balance that need for sort of security and consistency with the need to innovate and allow a little bit of experimentation?
Yes, absolutely. So I think this is very commonly been an uncomfortable position for the IT function internally. Those safety mechanisms traditionally we've had those in place through control. Everything comes to us, we kind of consume it, and then we spit it out and deliver it to people. But that often also is actually the cause of friction. So we'll see shadow IT, people trying to buy things directly. There was a big sort of disruption when SaaS really became a thing around bypassing IT. And so there's always been this little bit of a tug and a pull. But for me, this is actually a massive opportunity and one of the most important strategies, not only for stakeholder engagement and change management, but process design, is a democratization and commoditization of technology. And we need to think of that as being one of our goals and our objectives. So really making sure that democratization of tech and data empowers our staff to fully utilize it without any barriers. So instead of designing barriers in place, what we actually want to do is make sure that they have a safe space. So we give them rails. And some technology lends itself better to that than other technology. So as we're thinking about our procurement solutions, this ability to democratize technology solutions is something that's absolutely key. In order to make sure that we balance it against information protection and security, but also this kind of mushrooming of technology estates. I think anyone who's sort of around my age will remember things like Microsoft Access, for example, and people developing their own IT solutions in Microsoft Access, then we need to have those control mechanisms in place. So we need to make sure that we have guide rails, that we have governance processes in place, but also we're looking at training and skills to make sure that people understand some of the design decisions that they're making, how that may impact, for example, privacy, or may impact data quality as well. But this for me is almost as an exciting game changer as AI, is that democratization and commoditization of technology.
Now, you've led transformations, digital transformation in both academia and in government. Besides the financial metrics, how do you measure outcomes? How do you measure success?
So I think this is really important and absolutely key and critical, is to really understand what value an organization gets out of its digital strategy and its digital transformation. So whereas previously, at the early part of my career, that was kind of quite easy. We had a project, the project had a budget, we had some really kind of clear measurable KPIs. Did we deliver it on time, on money, and, tick sort of 5 or 6 boxes? But often we would have a disjoint between the CIO saying, yep, this project was really, really successful, and the CEO feeling less positive about, actually, did it deliver the business change that was expected and needed? So again, it's that real understanding of what the organization is trying to do, maybe some of the challenges, the barriers, but also those opportunities, and understanding what a post-implementation or a post-change world looks like for that organization. And we will never get that right from the beginning. So allowing projects or deliveries to be iterative, to be continuously adapted and evolved, make sure that we stay ahead of the curve. So it's really understanding what is important to that organization. So for example, in universities, it's about students continuing and completing their degree and getting good educational outcomes. And we measure ourselves on those business objectives, not on, how many tickets we've logged. Those are absolutely important metrics to give us an understanding of why our outcome looks the way it does. But actually, we have the same outcomes as the business has.
So when you're communicating to your leadership, you're talking in terms of business outcomes that they understand and that relate to the mission of the organization, it sounds like.
Absolutely, yes.
So that's fantastic. Now, I just back up for 1 sec,
Yeah.
and we'll wrap it up. I would love to hear, if you've been in technology now for 20 plus years, if you were to roll the clock back, or if you were to talk to somebody who's new in the CIO role today, what kind of advice would you give that person? And what would you encourage them to do in their first year as a CIO?
So I think there's a common theme throughout all of these questions, which is it's people first. So really make sure that you're prioritizing the people, make the time to identify who your stakeholders are, and not just your colleagues, but also within your own team. Who are the people that you need to talk to? Who are the important people? And by that, I don't necessarily mean job title or status, but who your end users, your departments, your internal customers, your external customers, and really carve out the time to build those relationships. And when building those relationships, take the time to find out how they feel and how they think and what their motivations and dreams are. And don't talk about the tech, don't talk about digital at all, but really understand what their challenges are, what makes them excited, what they would like to see done differently. And then think about the story. So join up actually how you as a technology leader could help them realize those dreams, help the organization achieve the mission that it's set for itself. And then think about how you sell that as a story, how we build the story. So talk about imagining a future where it looks like this, and try and not talk too much about the technology. Obviously, within your own department, you want to talk about solutions, but actually people get excited about the possibilities and the adventure to come.
So Sonja, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate your insights. Again, Sonja Browning Page, Director of Consulting Expert at CGI. Really appreciate the time and thank you.
Thank you very much.